Hello, everybody. Hello. Hi. Welcome to Don't Whistle at Night. We're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans. I'm your host, Don Yazzie. With me, the one and only Darren Yazzie, my co host. Today, we have Sasquatch expert, Bigfoot investigator, William Jevning, probably one of the top experts that I would ask questions and I consider him my predecessor. We've been working together for about 9 years or so. And, this guy helped me out a lot. Uncovered Bigfoot, how to track him, what signs to look for, and all that good nature. And here's my co host, Darren Yazzie.
Hey, what's up, guys? So we got Will, huh? Is-
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah, he's the he's the first guy that actually jumped on a YouTube list with it's actually his. You can find his work. I've seen it on Spotify, YouTube too. So
Creek
yeah, it's good.
Devil. Yeah. Creek
Yep, Creek
Devil.
Devil.
Yep, he covers
Yep.
Sasquatch and all that good stuff. And we did a documentary on the Navajo Nation not long ago. It's going to be, we don't know what streaming services it'll be available on, but it'll be a fun little thing to watch. And, hopefully you guys will enjoy that. But without further ado, let's bring on the guest of honor today, shall we, Darren?
Yeah,
All
let's see.
right, here we go. Right here, the man, the myth, the legend. This guy's been doing this longer than Darren and I have been born. Yeah,
Hmm.
put together. This guy. I was kidding. But Mr. William Jevning, you want to introduce yourself to everyone out there and all our listeners and viewers?
Hi guys, how you doing?
Oh yeah. Yep. Everyone's tuning in, coming back from their Sunday church or their Sunday fun day activities and all that. And let's jump into the first comment right here. Kurt W75. Hey, Double D, stopping in quick to share the show out. Catch y'all at 3. Dabs up. Oh yeah.
Nice.
What's up? JP,
Can't
can't
wait.
wait. Oh
Yep.
yeah. What's up,
I can't
JP?
either. Yeah, there's a bunch of questions.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of questions, man. Mr. Curly, yeah, it's Ed Bennett, Double D. Oh yeah, it's Ed,
Oh,
Mr. Curly. Right here, Kurt W75. Hey everyone, right here.
hey, Mal.
Sister Molly, Melody, hello, Alvarez. Hey, NJ, hello, yeah, it's Ed.
Hello.
Right here, Mr. Curly. You remember he was on your episode, Will? The lineman, the Arizona
Oh,
lineman.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this is him right here.
Interesting
Mr.
guy.
Curly. Oh
Mm,
yeah, yeah. Interesting stories. He's gonna be coming back on November. I had him on a few weeks ago, and we talked a lot about the Bigfoots, skinwalkers, a lot of interesting paranormal stuff. And but today is your episode. Today is your show. And is there any questions you want to ask Darren to start
I
off?
I don't think so. What do you guys want me to talk about?
Oh, well, you could just lead us. A lot of our viewers and listeners have never come across any of your material, your podcast. So you can just lead us into your beginning of your life, your Bigfoot encounters, and lead us down the rabbit hole.
Okay. Well, dealing with our buddy Adam in Hollywood, you mentioned the documentary, and of course, Adam and I are working on other projects. The second documentary plus the 10-part TV show that he created from the film footage when we were together at the Navajo Reservation in October. So I had to kind of think back. There were a couple of incidents that happened when I was about 10 years old that at the time, of course, I'd never heard of Bigfoot. This was back in 1968. And we lived out on 40 acres in Southwest Washington. We lived about 40 miles northwest of Mount Rainier on the Puyallup River. And we were at the very end of this dirt road that led back there. And there were only two other homes on that road. And the road went back in about a mile off the paved road. So, for a young boy, that was heaven, to be out in the woods, and nobody else around. So the first incident was we were sitting around watching TV, and I don't know if this was Bigfoot related or not, to be honest with you, but I kind of pieced things together years later, and I think it was. But anyhow, we were sitting around watching TV at night, probably around 9 o'clock, I guess, in the evening. So it was dark out, and there were no streetlights or anything back where we lived. I mean, it was dark back there. So, and you couldn't see the other houses from our house, the way the forest, there was a tree line that went up, and then the next house was an old lady who lived down past where we could see. So I see this light out the window way down at the beginning of where on our driveway was long where we could see it. It would come out and around and up to the house, several hundred yards. And it was going too slow to be a car and too fast to be somebody walking with a flashlight. And I told my mom, and she says, "Well, I guess we'll see in a few minutes if they come up to the house." So a few minutes later, we hear this furious pounding on the door. My mom answers the door, and there's this boy that's about my age. Now, the town we lived in, they had maybe about 1,500 people at that time. If I would have graduated through that school, my class was 35 kids. So it was a really small. I mean, I would have recognized any kid that was my age in the town. I didn't know who this kid was. So he was just scared to death. And he kept saying the rock quarry monster almost got him. And I'd never heard of anything like that. You know, I was out there with my bicycle, my dog, BB gun all the time, all over the place, never saw or heard anything like that. And my dad worked for the county, and they did flood control in the rivers. So there was a big rock quarry on the ridge above our house. And that's where they quarried the rock to line the rivers with. In those days, they lined the rivers to keep the rivers from flooding. The flooding was a huge problem back then in the valley. So I never heard anything. And so my dad come out of the bedroom, and he found out who this boy was staying with, and he knew the people. Of course, like I said, we knew everybody in that area. And he loaded his bike into his truck and took him to his grandparents' house. So when he came back, I heard my parents talking in their bedroom, and my mom says, "What's this rock quarry monster stuff?" My dad's like, "I think it's just some old hermit up hanging around the rock quarry." Well, there was no hermits up there, you know. But as a kid, you know, I'm thinking, you know, didn't think anything more about it. Now, about a year or so before I came face to face with a black bear back by the swamp. I mean, within 5 feet of this thing, it was coming up the trail, and I was heading down, and it was going after beehives and not kids, thankfully. So I was, you know, at that young age, getting pretty familiar with bear and some of the animals that lived in the outdoors. So again, that same summer, I was riding my bike around during the day, and my mom and 2 younger sisters were out by our barn, and they said, "Hey, come over here and look at this." So I come riding over, and normally, you know, if you're familiar with cows, usually they have patterns that they do throughout a day cycle, right? They'll be in certain pastures at certain times of the day. And normally our cows would have been way out in the far pastures. Well, here it was around 1 in the afternoon, and they were all in the barn with their heads poking out and their ears, you know, intently looking at the tree line. And I look over there, and the tree line was maybe 150 feet from the barn. And the brush was so thick there, you couldn't see a foot inside the tree line. It was so thick. But something had the little sapling trees just thrashing them back and forth. I mean, really violently. And she says, "What do you think that is?" I said, "Well, maybe the bear came back." The only thing I can think of, I never heard of anything else. So, you know, we kind of dismissed it, never thought anything about it. So fast forward a couple of years, 1970, we moved out of the valley. And we only moved about 4 miles, but it was in a different school district and just outside of the valley. So in 1972, and again, you know, I spent all my time outside fishing and hunting with my dad and uncles and stuff like that. So I was kind of the budding outdoorsman as a kid growing up. And one of my buddies named Mark came over to stay one weekend in December of 1972. And it snowed, and normally we got bored. So we thought that we'd go visit another of our friends that lived about a half a mile away named John. And we couldn't find the trail. John and I had a trail that went through the brush because it was a long walk to go roundabout on the road and everything. So we had a trail that cut through the brush. Well, with snow on the ground, we couldn't find the trail because it wasn't like it was a real well-used trail. But So we walked down the road, and then the railroad tracks went right in front of John's house. So we figured, okay, we'll go down the tracks. And the only thing that was not covered with snow was the rails themselves. So we got almost to John's house, and we see something red up ahead of us lying between the rails. And we're thinking, no, I wonder what that is. So we walked up there, and in the middle of the rails, it looked like the snow had been kind of pushed away like this, and there was a pile of animal intestines lying there.
Oh, man.
And it looked like about the amount that would come out of a medium-sized dog or a coyote, something like that. And we're thinking, well, how in the world did this get here? There's no footprints anywhere in the snow. So now the lay of the land was, to our left, there was kind of a hill that came down, maybe about a 60-degree grade or so. And to our right was an open field. You could see through the trees that lined it. So we didn't see any tracks coming the way we came. We could see out to the right that the snow was not disturbed there at all. So I said, well, why don't you walk down the tracks and see if you can see anything, and I'll climb this embankment over here. And they had cut a fire access road with a bulldozer the summer before. So it was kind of a crude road up there, maybe 8 or 10 feet above the tracks and right above this spot. So I climbed up there, and as soon as I crested that road, the snow was just chewed up with these big footprints. They looked like bare human footprints, but they were, I think we measured them later, I think they were about 18 inches. And I think there was 2 or 3 sets of them. They weren't all the same size. So I hollered for Mark. I said, hey, come and look at this. And we're standing there kind of oohing and awing, trying to figure out, number one, who's got feet that big, and why are they walking around in the snow barefoot? And it was only about 17 degrees that morning.
Oh, man.
So as that dawned on me, I thought, wait a minute, the guts down there on the tracks aren't froze yet. And in those kind of temperatures, that stuff freezes really quick.
Oh, yeah.
I said, so whatever threw that down there is really close by right now. That scared us. So we took off running to John's house. Now, John was our age. Like I said, we were 14. And he also had 2 younger brothers and 2 younger sisters. So we were pounding on the door, and they let us in. And we were just all this excitement, all these kids, right? And John's dad was a retired Navy guy, so he's kind of a little gruff sometimes. And he came out and he's like, boys, knock off all that noise. What's going on? So we told him, and he grabbed a camera and a .45 pistol, and he says, take me back to where you found that. So here goes this gaggle of kids and John's dad. And we showed him, and John and I talked about this recently. We think all the kids, most of us, destroyed most of the footprints. So they were just, walking around because, kids, you don't care. You just kind of wander around stuff. And then he proceeds to tell us what he thinks made these footprints. He did take a few pictures of them. And we're like, whoa, we love the old monster movies on TV, and we're thinking, wow, there's real monsters out here in the woods. So me and John and his brothers, we went out every weekend for a couple of months looking and never saw another thing. So, when you're that age, you get bored pretty quick, and we kind of just forgot about it. And so 2 years later, in the fall of 74, when I was 16, my dog was going crazy one evening right before dark. And we had to tie him up because he liked to roam the other farms, and he'd do things like at one time he herded 16 little piglets. I saw him two pastures away herding these little piglets over to our house. And I said, boy, you take those things home. And he herded them right back like he understood me. So we tied him up at his doghouse at night because, we didn't want him going and getting in some kind of trouble and somebody shooting him. So my dad always said, if anything comes in the yard, shoot it, because they were really, afraid of animals with rabies back in those times. So, instead of my hunting rifle, I hunted with a .300 Savage, and I had a 12-gauge shotgun and 322s. And I had my mom's single shot 22, which was dead on for aim. So I grabbed a couple of bullets. I figured it was a skunk or a raccoon or something like that. They were always coming in the yard. And so I grabbed the dog and untied him. I said, okay, go get him. And he goes flying out to the tree line. And this was right next to our barn where the tree line was. And it was kind of a pasture along our fence that walked out or went out to the where that spot where the tree line was. And The grass was about probably 3-4 feet high, the field grass, and it was still, this was probably October because it was getting pretty frosty at night, and I thought that because I'm thinking, oh, it's almost hunting season, and that's what hunting season is in October in this area. So usually you can tell because the frost is getting pretty heavy.
Mhm.
So he runs to the tree line and he stopped. I've never saw that dog stop for anything. I mean, he would do stupid things, running after groups of coyotes and all kinds of stuff. And coyotes will kill and eat a dog, but he
Yeah.
didn't care. He would just chase anything. So he stopped, and I'm approaching him, and I don't remember how far I was. I was maybe 50 to 100 feet away from him, and he wheeled around real quick, and he came running past me as fast as he could. Now, when he stopped, he had his ears up and his tail was up, and he was just intently staring at whatever was inside the tree line. And at the moment, I thought, what the heck is that dog doing? He's never done that before. And then as I walk up the tree line, I hear something moving in there. I thought, oh, maybe the porcupine's back, because 2 times in his life, he got a muzzle full of quills really bad.
Oh, man.
So I thought, well, maybe he learned his lesson after this first time. The second time hadn't happened yet. So I chambered around, and the fir limbs, there were fir trees that lined the edge of this area. Well, I guess it was all fir trees, except inside this particular spot, there was a big old maple tree in there. And the trunk was probably, 3 to 4 feet thick. It was a really big old maple tree. But on the outside, there were some fir trees. So you had to kind of push the fir boughs, the limbs out of the way to get into that opening that was under this big maple tree. So I pushed my way through, and I've got my rifle on the other hand. And as I cleared the limbs, 10 to 20 feet in front of me, standing next to the trunk of this tree, is this massive thing. And it was moving the leaves around with its right foot because the leaves were all off the tree at that time. So it was moving the leaves around with its right foot, and I stopped. And of course, in that situation, all this stuff goes through your mind in just milliseconds. And I just couldn't, I just kind of short circuited my thinking. I didn't know what this was, this massive thing that was standing on 2 legs. It was covered with hair, from across the shoulders. It was 4 to 5 feet across the shoulders. I said I was 16 at the time, so I was probably around 5'9" or so tall. And this thing was a good 2 feet above me. So I estimated around 8 feet. I don't know what the weight was. It was massive. It was just a solid trunk all the way down, and I stopped, and then it stopped, and we just kind of stared at each other. And I thought, like back to the bear when I was 9, I thought, how do I get out of this one? Because this thing was way too big to be shooting at with any kind of, I wouldn't have shot at it with my rifle or even the shotgun unless I absolutely had to. And so I thought, well, maybe if I shoot in the air, it'll scare it off. So I shoot in the air, nothing. It just stands there. And then I'm trying to focus on this thing, and then I hear this noise to my right rear. And they're about from behind some brush, here comes another one. And it walked past me and stood by the first one. And it was about a head shorter, a little bit lighter than the first one, but it looked very similar to the first one. And that's when fear kicked in. I turned around and took off running back to the house like the dog did. And my sisters, they all raked us over the coals after we told them we found the footprints 2 years before. So I wasn't saying a thing. I got the phone and I called John and I told him what happened. So me and him, one of our other friends, and his brothers all met with their hunting rifles before daylight the next morning. I don't know what we thought we were going to do, but we followed the tracks, and there were 2 sets of tracks in the frost. And we followed them for several hours until the sun came out and melted the frost, and then we lost the trail. Like I said, I don't know what we thought we were going to do, but if we caught him, but we didn't. So and we didn't say anything. So like I said, this was the fall of 74. So it would have been during the winter after January, I think, of 75. John and I were probably doing baseball or basketball after school. Had intramural sports, so we participated in a lot of that stuff. And because of where we lived out in the country, on the after school bus, there was hardly any kids on there. I think there was like 6 kids on the whole bus. So we're all spread way out from each other, going home at night. And John was sitting behind me, and we were kind of talking real quietly about this situation that happened a few months before. And one of our other friends, this guy Jim, I swear he had bat ears because he was sitting in the back of the bus and he heard us. So he comes up and he sits next to John. And he's now Jim was a nice guy, but he was a kid that was picked on a lot and didn't have very many friends or anything. So he asked me if he could interview me about what happened. So I thought, yeah, it's okay. It'll never go anywhere because he doesn't have any friends except us. So I told him, and then I kind of forgot about it. And he come back a couple of weeks later, and if you know who John Green was in Canada, he was one of the early authors on the subject of Bigfoot. And Jim handed me 3 of his books that were originally they were like magazines, maybe 70 pages or so. And I was astonished. I didn't know there was that much information out about these creatures. So of course, over the next few months, I poured over these books, and really didn't think a whole lot more of it. So that summer of 1975, for whatever reason, I guess I was going through growth spurts or something. I was sleeping. Usually I was out fishing or doing something, but I was sleeping this one day in late July or early August. And one of my sisters comes in my bedroom and she says, "Hey, there's 2 men here to see you." I'm thinking, 2 men? I don't know any men except my dad's friends or uncles, So I'm kind of groggy and I slipped on my barn boots and our driveway come around to the back door. Nobody ever used the front door. So I see these 2 guys, and the first guy I recognized was from John Green's books. It was Rene Dahinden. And the other man was named Dennis Gates. He was from northern Washington. He was a local Bigfoot hunter.
All
And,
legends. All
yeah,
legends.
yeah.
Yeah.
So he introduced himself, and then he asked me about the things that I'd seen. I told him, and he says, "Well, look, we're up here just a few miles away, south of Puyallup." At that time, there was, and I'd seen articles a couple times in newspapers where hunters had found footprints and there were screams going on, something they called the Puyallup Screamer at that time. And he says, "Well, we're down here investigating this. Why don't you come to our camp and you can meet Green and some of the local people?" So after they left, I called a friend of mine, and not many of us had cars in those days. So I didn't have one. So I called a friend that did have a car, and we drove out there and spent 2 or 3 days with Green and those guys. And then when they left, or right before they left, they said, "Look, we'd like you to keep in touch with us and work with us on this stuff, and keep us informed about anything that's going on in your area." So that's how I got connected to those guys. And Rene Dahinden and I stayed friends until his death in 2001. And of course, I knew Green, and I met guys like Bob Titmus and Grover Krantz, through these people along the way. So that's kind of how I got involved in all this, and have been doing it now since, I guess, 52 years now. Still going strong.
Oh yeah, time flies, doesn't it? Time
Yep.
flies.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty
Wow.
awesome, man. Let's Darren, before we start looking at the viewers' questions, do you have any questions of your own?
Yeah. When is the first time you actually started doing research, or besides this?
Well, it's funny when you're a kid, you come up with all these ideas. At least I did. And like I say, they left, I think it was in August, they went back to British Columbia. So we started school in early September. So I had a group of friends. There were about 10 of us all through school. And most of us went in the military together after school, in fact. And I'm still friends with most of them. But I sit down with the guys and I said, "Look, I think we need to organize our efforts here." I told them what they wanted us to do. And I created the first group. And at that time, there was only one other Bigfoot group that had a name to it, and it was the Bay Area group out of San Francisco. So I didn't know that. I didn't know if there were any groups or anything, but I created one. It was called we called it the Pierce County Sasquatch Investigation Team. This bunch of 17-year-olds, right?
Cool.
Wow.
So
yeah, I like that. I like that.
If I was 17, I would have been hanging out with you guys.
But
sure.
I told the guys, I said, "Look, these guys want to know what's going on." And we all live so far away from each other. Like I said, it was a really big school district, but it was spread out. And I have to laugh and I still tell the guys, our high school was out in the middle of this big field by itself. There was no other buildings around for miles. And everybody in the school nicknamed it Cow Pie High. because it was out in the middle of a pasture, right?
That's cool.
So
Cowboy high.
I told the guys, I said, hey, is there anything going on in your areas? So one of the guys who lived out in the town of Roy, which is out on the other side of Fort Lewis from where we lived, he said, well, there's been some weird screaming going on out by the Clark Ranch. And I told him, well, you know those guys. Why don't you ask them if we can come out there and kind of look around a bit? So we did. And he says, yeah, they said it's okay. Come on out. So we went to his place. I think it was on a Friday after school. And we had what we had in the way of camping stuff, which wasn't a whole lot back in those days. We had our sleeping bags that we never used. Excuse me. We never used sleeping bags because we didn't sleep. We're hunting Bigfoot, so we were sleeping at night. And we had this old canvas cabin tent that my friend Milo had, and it was an old one. It had no floor in it, and but it was like 6 feet high, and it was a big square thing. And so we brought that along. So the Clarks, they said, well, the screaming's been going on out over there. You guys can go look all you want to. We're not going out there. They were afraid of whatever it was out there. So we hiked out there, and then I found a cedar thicket of cedar trees. And I said, well, I think we better set up camp here and kind of get settled in for the night while we'll still have daylight. Because we always had the one obligatory flashlight that barely worked. I don't know why we never got batteries or anything for it, but it hardly ever worked. So there were 4 of us, and we made a big fire right in front of the tent. And we were sitting around talking, and this was a weird situation. You know, it was in the spring, so there was millions of tree frogs, really noisy in those areas that time of year. And suddenly we heard this scream, and it was maybe, we estimated about a quarter of a mile from us, but it was really loud. And then a couple of miles away, another one answered back. And this went on for a little while. Then it stopped. Then, so we just sat there kind of listening, like, you know, we didn't know what to make of that. We never heard it before. And then the tree frogs would stop all on one whole side of us.
Oh, that's not good.
And then after a while, you know, 1 or 2 would start croaking, then they'd all start again. So we're thinking, and then the screams, every once in a while, the screams would start up and they go for 15, 20 minutes, and they stop, this back and forth screaming. At one point, the tree frog stopped on one side of us, and then in front of us, and then to the other side. So you could tell we were being circled.
Oh.
And then they'd all start up again. So I guess it was 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And one of the guys said, well, I'm getting sleepy. I want to get some sleep. So I said, well, I think we better work in pairs where 2 of us are awake all the time. We'll take turns on watch. So his partner, me and Milo, we were partners, and him and this other guy, they didn't get along that well. They were my friends, but they didn't like each other very well. So one of them wanted to sleep, the other one didn't. And I'm like, oh God, just go lay down. We'll figure it out, right? So he goes in the tent, and after about 20 minutes, we hear him rustling around in there. And of course, you know, as teenage boys, what we're saying about him, you know, what he might be doing in the tent with himself in there, and we're laughing, you know, and then pretty soon he comes tearing, and he was a big guy. He was way bigger than we were, and you know, overweight and stuff. So he comes out and his hair's all messed up and stuff, and he says, "It's not very damn funny, you guys messing with me while I'm trying to go to sleep." And we all kind of look at him like, well, that's a great idea, but none of us thought of it. If we had, we would have been messing with him. Yeah. So he says, well, I said, look, if something really, I said, you sure you didn't just dream this? He says, no, I never fell asleep. I was laying there listening to you guys talk. So he says, I thought one of you guys was trying to get something out of your packs by reaching under the side of the tent instead of coming through the door and interrupting him. And I said, no, I said, look, you know, we weren't doing anything. Like, we're just sitting here talking. So I said, look, what happened? So he said, okay, he was laying there on his stomach, and he had, like I said, he was a big guy, so he had a wide back. And I said, what happened? He says, well, it felt like somebody grabbed me in my lower back with their hand. And I said, well, number one, none of us could drag your big butt out of the tent anyway. You know what I mean? Because we were all like, you know, we're skinny, 140-pound guys. We weren't very big. And I said, describe to me, you know, this hand, where from the heel of the hand to the tip of the fingers. Show me where the heel of the hand started on your body and where the fingertips ended. Well, where he indicated would have been about 18 inches long. And I said, do any of us have a hand that big? I'm always very Mr. Nuts and Bolts about descriptions. So I said, okay, look, and I'm still not buying this. I said, look, if there was something that did this, there has to be proof of it because the ground was real soft around where we were. So I said, well, grab the flashlight. Let's hope it works. And it did. So right behind, I was kneeling at the corner of the tent, and this happened right behind me within a couple of feet. There was this big bowled out spot in the ground that was probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches deep, and it was big. It was nearly a foot across, this bowled out impression. And then leading back from that into the forest was a line of 18-inch footprints, very clear in the dirt. And it kind of freaked me out because this thing was kneeling down. That's what the bowled out impression was. At least from my perspective, that's where its knee was, and it was reaching under the tent. And it kind of freaked me out because this happened right behind me. I thought, what could have snatched me up without any thought,
Mm-hmm.
So then we're on high alert. We build the fire up as big as we could. We're facing with our backs against the fire, all 4 directions. And at one point, Milo, he was facing the tent, and like I said, now granted, the fire wasn't very far from the tent, maybe 4 or 5 feet. So he's between the fire and the tent, and he turned around, and I'm on the opposite side. He turned around to ask me some question, and I wasn't going to turn around, so I kind of leaned my head back so I could hear him. And then when he turned back around, he jumped in the air. I swear it had to be 2 feet, and he yelled, "Oh shit!" and by the time we reacted, whatever it was had just simply stepped back into the dark. Well, like I said, the tent was 6 feet high, and this thing from the shoulders up was, at least a couple of feet above that. And he said the head was huge, and he saw these big piercing eyes staring at him. Yeah, I mean, it just freaked him out. So needless to say, none of us slept the rest of the night until around 5 in the morning before our first light. And then we were so exhausted that we sat down against this big spruce log with our backs to it. And all we had was machetes. We didn't have guns or anything with us. So we just figured, well, if something attacks us, we're gonna go out fighting,
But we're gonna hack it.
Yeah. So we woke up probably an hour later when it was daylight, and I said, look, we better get going. Let's pack up and get out of here while we can. So I wrote to John Green. And of course, back in those days, you had to write written letters to people. And I get a call from him. I got home from school 2 or 3 weeks later, and he says, "Hey, I'm in Seattle. I'm on my way to your house. Can you take me out to the Clark Ranch?" I said, "Sure." So I called a couple of buddies, and one of them to this day, my friend Scott, he'll always bring this up. He's like, you called and said John Green was on the way. And back in those days, if you saw somebody that wrote a book, they were automatically famous in your mind, right? Mm-hmm. So he's like, he didn't believe that I knew somebody famous. So here John Green picks him up, and he's like, and there he was. You really knew him. So we drove out there, and this always made me wonder. Now, we got there just after dark, and the Clark family was out on their porch. And then there were 4 of us in John Green's van. We just got out of the van, and this screaming started just moments after we got out of the van. It was loud, and these long screams. Everybody stood there in shock. Nobody said a word. And after a few minutes of this, Green says, I got to get back to British Columbia. So we loaded up, and he dropped us all off at our homes. And then years later, I was at Green's house in Harrison Hot Springs. And this would have been right after Harry and the Hendersons was released. We went up there to visit Green and have lunch with him and Bob Titmus. Mm-hmm. And we were sitting around talking, and Green, he looks at me and he says, "I'm still kicking myself for not taking a recorder to the Clark Ranch." I'm thinking, you're a Bigfoot investigator. Why the hell didn't you have a recorder? It was just, I just couldn't understand. I guess that's why Dahinden and I kind of got to be closer friends, because he was the field guy and Green was a journalist. I mean, he exposed the topic to the public through books, and that was kind of his thing. He wasn't really a field investigator where Dahinden was. So, we did that. Then we did a trip to Mount St. Helens in the fall of '76. And this was after I talked to Green, and he gave a college student in Portland, Oregon, my phone number and name. And this guy was writing a paper about Bigfoot for the college. And I don't remember which college he was going to, but probably Portland State or one of those. But he said, I need to talk to some witnesses, about what they saw for my paper. I'm like, okay. So I told him. And then he says, do you know about the Mount St. Helens where the miners were attacked back in 1924? And I said, yeah, I read it in Green's book. He said, have you ever been there? I said, well, my dad and uncle and I have hunted elk on the west side of Mount St. Helens, but we've never been on the other side. I said, I'm not familiar with the area that well. So he told me how to get to where the cabin had been located. They actually went there as part of this paper that he was writing to, kind of document, take pictures. Now, the cabin was long gone. It burnt down in the 60s. But you could still, we found the place pretty easy where they had cut some small logs and made little kind of makeshift benches between the trees with these little logs. So on the first night up there, and of course, here we were, these bunch of 18-year-olds that didn't know squat about anything. We loaded up, 6 of us did, and Scott borrowed his dad's brand new VW van, and here we take off down to southern Washington. And there were some funny parts of it, like Paul was the guy from Roy, and he had we told the story about his Korean beans. His dad brought stuff back his uncle brought stuff back from the Korean War. So we had some old sea rations that were, really old. And he's sitting behind me. I'm in the front navigating with the map, and him and Milo are in the middle, and then the other 2 guys are in the back. And he taps me on the shoulder and he says, do you think I should eat these? He had the can open, and I swear this stuff was actually coming up out of the can.
Oh man!
And I said, I think you better throw that away before it attacks us, right? So he's sitting like this, getting ready, and we're in the middle of Interstate 5, and he's going to throw this stuff out the van window.
That's not going to work.
I know. Scott looks up in the mirror and he says, there's a state trooper right behind us, and we're all like, no. And all these arms reached and grabbed him and froze him like that.
Oh, damn.
So then we get down to a little town called Castle Rock, and it's north of Vancouver, and a little tiny place, but they had a Safeway, and we went in, and 3 of us went one way. Now we all pulled together, and we're talking November 76. So $200 was a bunch of money in those days. And 3 of us, now we had no plans at all about what we were doing, no logistics. So 3 of us took a shopping cart, went one way. The other 3 took another shopping cart, went the other way. And everybody just kind of grabbed whatever they thought they wanted to eat. And most of it was canned food and just ridiculous stuff. The shopping carts were full, both of them. But we didn't think, we just loaded it in the van. So we ended up going up to Spirit Lake, where the ranger station was, and it was at night. There was nobody up there in November. It was pretty much closed down. And I remember across the road they had this big parking lot, and it looked like it was fairly new blacktop, about 5 acres in size. It was pretty large. And we decided we parked on the far side of it. We had to spend the night there because we weren't at the end of the road yet, where the trailhead went up the mountain. So we couldn't get a fire started. It was super windy, and the moon was out, but it was super bright. And if you've been around Pumice, well, you guys know in desert areas how bright the moon can shine the ground at night.
Yeah.
Well, Mount St. Helens was like that. It was that light gray ash, and the moon just lit everything up for miles. You could see really well. So since we couldn't start a fire, we decided to go for a hike. And we discovered that pumice is actually very slippery. So being teenage boys, you're all about doing stupid things, right? So we got on our butts and we're sliding down these slopes in our jeans. And then when we got to the bottom, we climbed back up and do it again. And then pretty soon we started feeling that our butts were kind of cold. Well, ash is volcanic glass, so it ate out the butts of our jeans.
Oh, snap.
So we had to go back to the van to change our pants. So we get back to the van, and Scott doesn't have the keys, and his wallet's gone. And we're like, oh, geez, that's the only keys we got. And all of our money's pooled in his wallet and everything. So we had to go back up to that ridge and search around for this stuff. Now, we figured it probably come out of his pocket, one of these sliding trips. And the pumice, you'd be up to your knees in the pumice. So we started thinking, crap, this stuff might be buried. Well, it was piled neatly right next to where we were sliding. We'd stopped to slide down.
Oh, man.
so somebody, I mean, it had to be somebody or something, and they put the keys on top of the wall and they were sitting right there.
What?
So we're thinking that's
Hmm.
bizarre. So we're looking around, and pretty soon we find this set of they measured 19 inches, but I think it was slippage in the pumice. Hundreds and hundreds of these Bigfoot tracks going up this ridge as far as we could see. The line went, and
Wow.
we took some pictures, and I sent him to Green after the trip. And again, all he said was like, "Oh, did you use a flash when you took those pictures?" I, yeah, Green kind of he kind of bugged me in that way. He was like, he never really had any information or help, or yeah, those are pretty good tracks. Did you use a flash? Or and then I think the next time was in 1980 when I was a sergeant in the Army stationed at Fort Lewis, and I didn't get to do a whole lot of work, for the late 70s because I was in the military and gone in Europe for a couple of years. But when I came back, I got a call from a family friend who the guy lived off the grid his whole life, and it was quite an operation for him to go someplace and find a payphone to use, because there weren't a whole lot of them in the area he lived in. So he called my parents' house, and I was there, and he says, "You need to come up here right away." So if he said that, I thought, well, there must be something serious going on. So I got in my truck and I drove up there, and I had my 357 at the time in the truck with me. So he says, well, I got a visit today from local game officials. And what had happened, apparently, according to this game official supervisor, was now when I was a teenager, this guy, Charlie, like I said, he lived off the land. So he would get these $5 permits to cut cedar shake bolts, because up in the mountains here, you get huge cedar trees that were fallen, decades ago. But cedar is very waterproof, and you'd see these logs that were 8-10 feet thick in creek beds and stuff. But if you cut into it with a chainsaw about 10 inches, it was still perfect, beautiful wood inside. So you could cut the shake bolts, and the mills would sell those for cedar shakes for roofs.
Mm.
So it was worth a lot of money. I mean, a truckload would be worth $600, and you can make that in a day, which is pretty good money back in those days.
Oh, yeah.
So we had built a lot of the roads up above his place with his old Dodge Power Wagon. He had a 1948 Dodge Power Wagon. The thing was tough as nails. So we would just kind of point wherever we thought there was an opening in the trees and build these roads out to find these downed trees. So the game official, there was a place called the Alder Flats when you went through all these switchbacks up to the top of this mountain, and then it flattened out for miles up there. And not far into that was a big area of alder trees. And we knew for many years there was a herd of elk that lived in that area. So he says, well, the game official asked him, he says, well, have you heard any strange screams lately? And he played dumb. He kind of knew what he meant right away. And he's like, no. Well, side note, Charlie, he drained power from the Puget Power electric lines, and the company could never figure out how it was being done. So the game warden says, well, I know how it's done. If you don't tell me, or if you talk about this, I'm going to let Puget Power know where their electricity is going.
Wow.
So he showed him the written report, and apparently some mushroom pickers up there had found the bodies of 2 elk up on the Alder Flats. And it said in the report, now this report, it was already typed up when he came to see him from early that morning, and it said the elk were dismembered without the use of tools. So something had pulled these animals apart. And you guys know from hunting, how hard it is you can't just pull an animal apart.
Yeah.
Especially a big animal like an elk. Mm-hmm. So I went up there because I knew the area, and I looked around up there with my flashlight. I had a good flashlight this time, and I had my 357 on me, and sure enough, I found where the elk were killed. There were 15-inch Bigfoot tracks all over the place up there. Wow. And I took pictures, and you could see where they just thrashed the brush. It was a huge mess. And again, I sent the pictures to John Green. He's like, yeah, those are pretty good pictures. Those are pretty good tracks. And that was it. So I kind of branched off on my own after that, because I thought, well, why in the world am I going to send? And those guys, they were extremely important to the topic, because the public wouldn't have known about this stuff hadn't it been for those 2 guys. But I felt they weren't moving the subject forward at all. I'd ask them questions about behaviors and feeding and all that kind of stuff, and they just didn't want to hear that stuff. Their part, of course, they were trying to get the scientific community involved, and they couldn't. So, they weren't really interested in delving into it that deep. That was kind of their thing. So I understand that's where they were coming from, but they should have quit doing it if they were going to not do that anymore. If the scientists didn't want to be involved, then kind of let it go. But
yeah,
so
definitely.
anyway, I've been doing all this stuff since, and met people everywhere.
Moving forward, and
Moving forward.
today is he's everywhere. You know what I mean? Like every
Oh yeah.
vehicle, you look at his sticker.
Oh,
And
especially this area. You see Bigfoot stickers on
oh
everybody's
yeah,
stuff right here.
Right.
definitely. Let's catch up with the viewers' comments real quick. War Cry podcast caught y'all. Oh yeah, this guy. He's a podcaster out of Oklahoma, so
Nice.
he has a lot of Bigfoot and Dogman stories on his podcast. So pretty good information as well. And here he comes again. I haven't heard from Will Jevning since his Sasquatch Chronicle days. Oh yeah, yeah. That's how I first heard of you too, as well.
Well, I've
yeah.
had Creek Devil out since 2014, I believe.
Oh yeah. I'm late
There's
to the podcast game. I barely listened to that. Like I barely got into the podcast like 2000 and since COVID actually.
yeah.
Since
I,
COVID.
I'm trying to move. I'm trying to move into video stuff now for the show. So I've been doing
yeah.
interviews. So I want to have almost 1,200 interviews or
Oh,
shows
wow.
on YouTube. So and
Yeah.
I'd kind of gotten away from Spotify, and people started bugging me like, "How come your stuff isn't Spotify anymore?" So I'm posting everything to Spotify every day, and then through Podbean it goes out through other platforms as well.
Oh,
So
interesting.
I've been getting back on
Yeah.
the stick.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Right here's Chris. Right here, the elegant hobo. What's up, fellas?
There's
Will, how
Chris.
you doing?
Hey, buddy. Chris is going to come back on my show here pretty soon too when I can get my ducks in line. So
Oh, nice.
he's been doing some
Hey.
pretty good fishing lately.
Oh yeah. Lake Okanagan or like
Yeah.
that. I heard there was a water serpent that came up that had horns, like a big old giant head of a serpent that
I've
came
heard
up.
of stuff from that area. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the same serpent. A similar serpent like that's been seen around Lake Powell and San Juan River with a
I
horn, but it's
I think
black.
Okanagan. I think isn't that the one they call Ogopogo? Is that
Yeah,
Okanagan?
Ogopogo.
I
Yeah,
think so.
Okanagan.
Yeah.
That monster's name right here. Lysidric Willie. Hey, what's up, bros? What's up, Lysidric?
What's up?
Right here, Mr. Curly, Mr. Jevning. What's the craziest stories you have heard? I heard a story about the special forces that watched dogmen the Taliban when the Bigfoot arrived through a portal to kill the dogman. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I heard
Yeah.
that wild story before.
Yeah, I heard that also too.
Yeah.
Well, I
Oh,
one of the stories, and you guys, we've talked about Carroll in Missouri. I've done this. I've talked to thousands of people over the years, literally, and heard all kinds of different encounters, and most of them are very similar to one another, but they're with variations. But after this many years, you think you've heard just about everything. The first time I talked to Carol, I was sitting there with my mouth hanging open because she talked about her neighbor, and and she lives in a very small community in Missouri, and it's not that far from Arkansas, where the legend of Boggy Creek and all that stuff, the Boggy Creek monster is. So, and I think it's just a few miles from what she told me. But anyhow, she talked about her neighbor. Another lady was coming over to her place. Apparently, they have a little path between their properties, and she got knocked on the side of her head, knocked out. So when she woke up, here was this big hairy creature, kind of standing over, looking at her, and then she passed out again. So the next time she woke up, this thing had opened her midsection and was eating her small intestines in front of her.
What the heck?
And one of the other neighbors had just happened to come along with these dogs, and the thing got up and bolted, thankfully for her. And then she showed Carol the scar where they took her to the hospital and fixed her and everything. But Um, that's pretty awful. I mean, there is another guy I'm in contact with. I probably shouldn't say too much, because of his position, but being on the kill teams and stuff, because they do have kill teams for the bad ones, and it's not something they do very often because they're so dang hard to kill. They can't. He said usually the best they can do is kind of disrupt their patterns when the bad ones are coming around doing stuff. Situations like we talked about with all the folks that are having their livestock being killed. But a lot of these happen with people too when they start coming around, and some stories people have contacted me about all kinds of stuff. Some, in many cases, they'll contact me for help in their situations. There was a couple in Australia, in fact, with the Yowie, which is very similar to what we got here.
Oh yeah.
They were being stalked by this thing around the church, and I told them all the things to do, but for whatever reason, they weren't really following the instructions as well. So they had to move away from there. It got so bad. But in every other circumstance, like Carol's and some others, the measures that I was, we come up with actually work. So, and we've talked about that, with using a combination of bleach and lemon juice, because these things are very territorial. So you spray the perimeter of where you don't want them to cross. They get mad about it, but they will stay on the other side of that boundary. And I've had it work every time that I've had people use it. So, things like changing up your patterns because they watch for patterns. Forest in Texas. She was texting me. It's our anthropologist. She was texting me earlier this morning about the ongoing activity there. Where these things that come in, where the shed where she keeps the stray cats in at night. She has this really heavy mesh, and they started poking holes in that. So she had to take the mesh down and close the window. And the same thing happened in the town of Roy, where, the guy we knew had rabbit cages, and these things, then, I'm talking about, that heavy mesh used for rabbit cages or like chickens, things like that. The really heavy stuff where there's only like a 1/2 inch squares. Well, these things had poked their fingers 2-inch holes through that stuff. And on the rabbit cages, their rabbit cages were built with 2x6 boards, the frames. And I remember the cages were only about 2 feet off the ground. So the rabbit pellets would drop on the ground and they could shovel them. Well, one of these cages, you could see where they had poked their fingers up through the bottom and then see if I can show you, kind of crushed it like that, and then pulled it out. So it tore out 2 of the seams. And of course they killed all the rabbits, and rabbit was shredded all over the yard. So I've told her, I said, I've heard this exact same thing before, where they'll come in and after animals, and it's just, but Carol's situation was one that was probably one of the worst. I mean, there's other situations. We had a guy in, oh geez, where was Troy? He lives in Georgia, but I think this happened to South Carolina, where him and 2 buddies were going fishing on this little stream. And they heard this screaming on this ridge above them, just horrible screaming. And this thing made no bones about its presence. It was thrashing brush and screaming while it was running down the slope at them. They got within 20 feet from them and threw an absolute tantrum, and these guys were totally freaked out. And of course they run like heck to get away from it. But, so those are the kind of things that people tell me. Those are a couple of the worst ones, I suppose.
Wow. Let's hold on there real quick. Let's catch up. Let me read a few of these real quick, then you can shoot. Digger Dog, morning all. Digger Dog, Will. And right here it says, awesome story, Will. Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely.
And right here, Will, there's a pine tree, Bigfoot, and heart. Right here. JV.
I know JV.
Oh, JV Noseworthy. That's a pretty interesting last name right there. Noseworthy. Huh. Paranormal NL podcast and PNL blog team. Look, it's Will. Yeah, it is.
Like a groundhog to come out.
Oh, yeah. You see the shadow. Shout out to the JRG. Yeah, especially, right there, JRG. Heck yeah. Okay, right here. The elegant hobo. Quack.
There's Chris.
Yep. Ogopogo backwards is
Oh,
Ogopogo.
funny. I didn't see that.
Hello. Fun fact of the day right there. Our friendly neighbor of the north right there. Ogo, yeah, that's what he
I'll
said.
bet there is. Yeah.
Yep. Let's see here. It says, please be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, share, hit the bell so you know when these guys go live. Yeah. Like a
Exactly.
lot of
Yeah.
our viewers on Facebook, like or YouTube, 80% of our viewers are not subscribed. So
Yeah.
we get a lot of
No.
traffic, but no one's sticking. So it's like throwing spaghetti to the wall, see
You know,
which
I've
plate's
got
gonna
the same
stick.
thing with my YouTube channel too. It's like I look at the analytics and it'll say, well, 63% of your viewers aren't subscribers. And it's like, come on, guys, it doesn't cost anything to hit the subscribe button.
Yeah.
You're not
Just
Right.
obligated to anything.
yeah, just give a like button at least
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
See here, Corvid, New Mexico, Jenny Pond on board. What's up, Jenny? Team
What's up?
Rama, Bigfoot, New Mexico. She was one of
Mm,
the ones that wanted to come on your podcast as well.
Oh,
Creek
nice.
Devil, yeah.
Nice.
She has a speaker with her. His name is Norman, so he has a lot
Huh.
more insight on the cultural ties with the Navajo Nation and its Bigfoot. So he'll go a little bit deeper. So that'd be another great episode for
yeah.
you on Creek Devil to have. Yep. Darren, you have any questions?
Oh yes. What's your ideas on the whole like the whole paranormal side of Bigfoot? Do you believe uh portal Bigfoot? Like the whole mind speak on the whole the whole idea of that of it not being uh physical type deal, where they say that.
Well, my experience has been everything I've seen over 52 years plus now has been, flesh and blood creatures out there. I have yet to see, I mean, that's just me, you know. If somebody can show me something, I'll, look at it. Even things like now, Don, you know this. I wasn't a big supporter of Bigfoot structures until we went and met those folks out there picking pinion nuts in October.
Mhm.
And they pointed us in the direction. The couple of structures they found, I think, had been torn down, but Adam and I kept walking down that road, because we wanted to give it a good look. And the situation where you jumped out of the Jeep and ran over and talked to those people. I laugh about it now. We're always talking about, Don would never wait for the Jeep to stop. He's out running, and
Oh yeah.
we
Oh
got to
yeah.
stop.
It was fun. It was fun. It was a blast. Like
It was a fun trip, yeah. But
it
those
was.
people said if you go back down to this road where there's a tire that marks it and go down about a quarter mile, you'll see these two structures. Well, Adam and I parked at the beginning of the road, and you went the other way because they said they'd heard some kind of a growling or something. So Adam and I walked in, and I said, well, people, we didn't see anything in a quarter mile. I said, well, everybody's estimate of distance is different. So we ended up walking about a mile back there, and to say those were roads is giving them a lot of credit. They were basically a little more than trails, really, in that forest. So we walked about a mile back in there, and then sure enough, we did find a very rudimentary kind of a structure that was built. None of the wood was cut or anything like that. It was just a little more than a lean-to, really. But remember, they said that they found the baby Bigfoot lying in this thing, and that it was reddish brown, and as they saw its eyes blinking, was being very quiet. And then they saw the mother, and they all took off. So we had a great group of witnesses. We found, and it wasn't the structure they found, but who knows how many the creatures actually made. I know we did look a little bit, but not a thorough canvas of the area. But there was the small one, and then there was the beginnings of a larger one next to it. So to me, that supported the claim that they at least sometimes do make stuff like this. Not the ornate ones you see from Ohio, places like that. Not that they don't do them there, because I do have one guy whose brother is a politician in Ohio, and he found some kind of, I don't know if you call them structures, they're more piles, but they're it was very unusual. and these very large piles of brush, and apparently they were kind of hollowed out on the inside. So those kinds of things are what I would expect to find these creatures having made, not these real fancy, ornate things and stuff like that. So I do have kind of an open mind in some things. I'm, like what, I should have been from Missouri. It's like, the show me state, show me and I'll buy it. Right.
Oh yeah, yeah. What about the one we found by Norbana Pass on the north side? Remember how that structure was all woven together?
Yes. Oh,
Strange
at
way.
first I thought that was just the woodcutters. But the more I thought about, after we found that second one from what the family told us, I got thinking about that, and I thought to myself, well, we saw a lot of places out on the reservation where woodcutters had cut wood and they just left the limbs. Because originally I was thinking, oh, well, maybe they're going to stack that up so it doesn't get wet and then come back and get it another time. But that wasn't the case. Even in that spot, there was still good wood just lying around on the ground. So I thought, well, maybe that's exactly what that is. Maybe that was something one of the creatures made too. And then remember the people told you that there was the big white one, the older one that lived in that spot and was eating wild horses.
Oh yeah.
And I thought to myself, okay, look, if you're a female with an infant, you're not going to run around and try to take down something as big as a horse with an infant in one arm. And I got thinking about that because I interviewed a guy in Canada, a moose hunter, and one of these things killed a moose right in front of him. And he talked about what it did to bring the moose down. So, you could equate, the size of a horse to a moose easy enough. Big animal, hard to bring down. So what do you do with the infant while you're going out and catching dinner? Well, you got to tuck it away somewhere to try to keep it away from predators or anything else in the area, right? Especially an infant one like that. There's plenty of big cats and stuff around that would take advantage of that. So I thought, well, that's the perfect thing. Not going to be there very long. You hide it out instinctively. They're going to be quiet, not move a whole bunch. Baby animals do that. So to me, that made perfect sense. It all sort of fit together nicely. So if somebody can show me something different, I'm open-minded enough to say, okay, well, before I might have said I don't buy that, but now, like in this case, we had the family, we found the evidence, everything, and then the reasoning fit behind it. So I'm like, okay, I can buy that now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a good thing that to know that these Bigfoot are actually have a family system. Like a nuclear family. It always surprises me to hear that, and just rarely I'm starting to hear that the Bigfoot having taking care of children. It always kind of just makes me kind of happy to know that these Bigfoot, they get together. They have families with the mom and dad, little baby.
Well,
baby sass.
They're a primate. So when you look at all other primate species, I do what I call comparative. Well, I don't call it. It's called comparative anthropology, where you look at other things that are similar, and what do they do? And like Forrest and I talked about how a lot of times their behavior is very similar to chimp behavior in a lot of the different kinds of things they do. So since all primates are very what's the word I'm looking for? They're kind of they're social. They're very social, just like we are. So they're going to do things as a group. The families are going to be families. I don't know about friction between groups. I've interviewed people who. There was one case where these people actually witnessed this. Where two different groups, family groups, apparently, because the groupings are typically 4 to 6 members in a group, and that's kind of a loose number because it can vary quite a bit either way. But and in some areas, like in southern Washington, we knew there was one for this one particular family group, and then not far from them there was a group of 3 males that would stay together, and once in a while 1 or 2 of those males would go over and join with the family group for a time, and then they would split off again. But this person said that these 2 Bigfoot groups, they were doing a lot of vocalizations at each other, but apparently at one point, one of the alphas, whichever one was more dominant, had the final say when this hollering, and then both groups got very quiet and they moved past each other without any kind of incident. So I mean that kind of stuff, happens in nature with other primate species too. They lull this noise, and
Mhm.
then once the issue's settled, then they go about their business.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting topic. Like what you were just saying, the primate and all that. The one of the things that they found out in Africa, they left a camera out to observe these primates. I think might have been gorillas. It could have been chimps. Watching this group, and it was nighttime, and they noticed the alpha. He grabbed a huge rock and he went up to this tree, and all the apes, they went around, they gathered around that man, that the alpha in the tree,
Hmm.
and the alpha walked up to the tree, and he had the rock in his hand, and he was waving the rock like this, and he was mumbling something in their own little language to the
Hmm.
tree. All the other apes were just quiet observing. So
Yeah.
they do weird things. Maybe they might do something like that as well. And like the same thing, like how chimps, when how they
Yeah.
roll. And Mr. Curley shared a story that a medicine man opened up the door, and a little Sasquatch came rolling in like that. He rolled
Oh.
around in a circle and rolled back out the teepee.
That's interesting, huh?
Yeah, so and also the orangutan, this one zoo escaped the zoo, and he walked around the zoo, and he was throwing rocks at his the other apes, and he was observing, and he was looking like being like a peeping tom at other animals, and he was throwing pebbles at at the other apes. So
Well,
it sounds like Sasquatch, throwing rocks and just peeking behind the tree, being creepy and
well,
stuff.
you hear that sometimes, where people say, and I was looking at some of the reports that I have, and where I get a lot of people email me things. People don't want to talk on the show; they'll write a long email to me about what happened, and
Mm.
in some cases, it's the little small rocks or pine cones or something like that, and it's hard to interpret what they mean by that, But the other one, when they're throwing, softball sized rocks, that's serious. That's where they're trying to get you. That's where, if that happens, you want to leave that area because that's what they're saying. Get out.
Oh man, yeah, yeah. Like on the Navajo Nation, there's stories of them throwing like basketball sized rocks.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. That's not
Yeah.
that's not the friendly ones. That's not a come over and talk kind of a situation. That's where I'm going to bash your head in.
Oh yeah,
But see, again, other
definitely.
other primates do that kind of stuff too. They'll throw rocks. I
Mhm.
had a guy and it's funny, Tom, the poor Tom, he's gone now, but Tom and I were talking a few years ago, and I said, I've talked to a lot of people that have had all kinds of things thrown at them. Even we had, tree branches thrown at us one time years ago. But I have yet to hear of something that's common among other primates like chimps, where they throw their feces.
Oh man.
And
Hmm.
I'll be doggone like clockwork. And we were talking privately about this, and I get an email from a guy, and the guy was really shook up. So like you chuckle about it, but it's like it was a very serious situation because it actually hurt the guy. Where he saw this thing, and it threw its feces at him with such force, it hit him in the chest, and it actually hurt him, injured him.
wow.
So I thought, boy, there's not a story you want to tell around that Bigfoot threw its poop at me and broke a rib or two, but
Mm.
but it's the same kind of thing that chimps and other primates do. They throw objects and even their own feces.
Mhm. Oh
So
man.
everything I hear, it's like, okay, it's just like these other things. So it's like, okay, that's absolutely believable.
Oh man. Jeez. Yeah. I do not want that. I smelled them. That's I don't want their poop to be
Yeah.
thrown at me. Heck
No,
no.
it wouldn't be a good thing. No. Well, my brother-in-law, I have to laugh. We were in Northern California. I took him around the Bluff Creek area back in, I think it was 2007. And there's really one road that goes through that area, Highway 96 along the Klamath River. And it's just a little 2-lane road, that parallels the river. And if you're going to go from Willow Creek to Bluff Creek, you have to go that road to, it used to be, I think, Forest Road 10 or 13, but now it's Patterson Road that winds up into that area. But back then, we were going up there one morning, and there was a pile of crap on the side of the road. It was just on the inside of the white line, on the outside of the road, that was so massive. I had to stop. It was so big. We stopped, and I measured the segments that were 4 inches across. Now, number one, there's no bear that does that, and there's a lot of bear up there. I see bear every time I go up that area, and there's some
Yeah.
big ones in there, but they don't poop 4 inches across. I'm sorry, and there was probably 2 gallons of this stuff in this spot,
Oh man.
easily. And my brother-in-law, he's funny. He says, man, if a car hit that, they'd skid off the road and get killed in the Klamath River.
Oh man.
that
Jeez.
that wouldn't be a good way to die. I
Oh
got
man.
killed on Bigfoot's poop,
Oh man. Let alone to think of the turd cutter that cut that turd, man. Days.
But it was
That's some scary stuff.
you could
That's some
see,
scary stuff.
and it
Oh,
was so many. They'd been eating blackberries. It was just, I mean, just this massive pile
blackberries.
of
Oh
seeds
man.
and stuff.
Hey
Never.
Will, what about the one we found on Fort Defiance Plateau? That one was a mix of pine cones, rabbit fur, deer
Yeah.
fur,
Yep.
and yeah, it was strange. So they definitely eat off the land, whatever's available
Oh
on
yeah.
out there.
These things are garbage guts. I mean, in that same area where we find, there's one area, and I don't know if they still do it, but when you go past the Hooper Reservation up into that country, there's an area that's kind of adjacent to the Bluff Creek drainage system that I go to once in a while. Or I haven't been there for years, but I used to go there a lot.
Hmm.
And in August, I always found Bigfoot scat all over that area. And they were always eating pretty well. I think they were eating manzanita because a lot of times the scat was full of manzanita seeds and hair and stuff like that. So one time I took a stick. I just wanted to see what they'd been eating. So I pried this one pile apart. And the cellophane bags, you go to the grocery store in the produce section, they have those bags that are impossible to open.
Yeah.
I found a whole bag in the middle of this scat. So this thing had been eating garbage. And it was just apparently just stuffing its mouth with whatever was there and swallowing. Because the bag was whole, it was intact, but it was inside this pile of poop.
Oh man, he's dumpster diving, that's for sure.
Yeah. So
Like,
when I say they're garbage guts, I mean literally they'll eat anything.
Yeah. Over in Kaibito, Arizona, we had these chapter house officials. They said they seen a man in the garbage can, the huge old garbage trash bins.
Yeah.
And one of the ladies, she walked out there to chase him out there, and she was yelling while she was getting closer to the bins. She seen this guy poking out. Yeah, it was poking out, and she was getting closer, and he stuck his upper torso out. And it was Sasquatch. And she turned around screaming, ran back into the office, locked all the doors, and told everyone to stay inside.
That's more common than you think. I interviewed a guy a few years ago, and I can't remember what part of the country he was in, but he was remodeling his house. So he had this big dumpster, and it was a fairly large one, just outside of his back door. So because he was remodeling the house, he didn't have any way to cook. He kind of gutted the house and was completely redoing it. So he ordered pizza. So when he went to throw the pizza box out into the dumpster, he opens the back door and it's like 5 feet away. Here's this thing in the dumpster, it's a common story. Lots of times, I remember hearing stories from up, there's a lake. We knew this old guy used to build lakes for a living. And there was one of the lakes that he created, and a Seventh-day Adventist church owned it. He'd build lakes, then he'd sell them. And they owned this one particular lake, and there were stories from up there where these things were seen coming in there, getting in the dumpsters. So it's a really common thing.
The one of the most worst ones that I heard was them digging into the sides of the outhouse and sniffing up the used feminine products.
There was Rene Dahinden used to laugh so hard about us. There was a story back in the 60s where him and John Green and Bob Titmus, they had gotten really a real hatred for each other. Rene hated Green because Green took, when you see Green's books, the pictures of tracks and stuff in them, those were all Rene Dahinden's pictures. And Green took those without his permission and never gave him credit in the beginning, and then never paid him ever for the use of those pictures. So that kind of started the friction between those two. So he didn't like Titmus either, because there was the Texas millionaire back in the 60s, Tom Slick, who created it was a Pacific Northwest expedition. He hired Green and Dahinden and Titmus. He hired Titmus to be the head of the group. And I think it's because Titmus had, a name in the subject before Rene did, even though Rene was probably involved before him. But Titmus made a name in California, when they first started getting noticed with the tracks and everything there. But anyhow, he got hired as the head of the project. So Rene thought he should have been in charge of it, even though he was only 26. So that's why he didn't like Titmus. So anyway, they thought, well, maybe, like people who don't use any kind of scientific reference for what it is they're coming up with, they thought, oh, we wonder if they'll be attracted by used feminine napkins. So Rene would always get into hysterical laughter when he talked about it. He says, I can just picture these two, skulking around gas station bathroom, women's bathrooms, while Green would be the lookout, Titmus would go in and get the articles and come out. he would have tears coming down. He'd laugh so hard about the idea that
Oh man. So my aunt's one that my aunt and her daughters are the one that walked up on a big black Bigfoot digging into the outhouse going in, and they seen him holding a tampon, a feminine product to his nose, and he was sniffing. He was making an ungodly noise, like a guttural growling noise,
I
they
think
turned around and walked off.
I think it's probably a rare thing, but like Forrest said, our anthropologist, because she knew a lot about chimps, and apparently sometimes male chimps will get fixated on if there's a woman that spends a lot of time around them. Sometimes they can get fixated on that woman, sexually. So not something that happens normally. So, maybe that particular individual had some kind of a fetish or something. We don't know, but it's not something you would normally expect.
No, we have I think people are thinking it's Bigfoot around certain parts of the Navajo Nation. Latest one was around Gallup, New Mexico. Oh no, it was a Ganado, Ganado area on the reservation. They said they heard they recorded actually a Bigfoot yelling, and it was trying to mimic a cow. And over in Page, Arizona, they were saying the same thing. It was trying to mimic a cow, but it wasn't a cow. It was longer, and it was slaughtering livestock in the area.
Well, if you look at what the Salish up here said years ago when they were talking to Green and those guys, I can't remember what the native word was, but it translated into, and I'm not sure how good the translation was, but it translated into ventriloquist. And what it meant was they were imitating things they heard. And even in Window Rock when we recorded that night, for an hour, those howls. And you probably saw the Thinker Thunker piece he did on that. Adam sent him 60
I really
seconds.
liked it.
He sent him 60 seconds of that. Yeah, that's in the first episode of the TV show that Adam created. And I told him when he sent it to me, I said, you need to contact Thinker Thunker and ask him if we can use that in the show. That has to be in the show. So he did, and he gave us permission. So, and I told Adam when I first heard it, I said, that's a Bigfoot. And he wasn't 100% sure, but I've heard it so many times over the years in different locations. I know what the sound is when I hear it now.
We were far from that mesa, and you can feel it in your chest. You can feel it vibrate.
We were 1,000 yards away from that mesa, and it was still so loud. And that's even what Thinker Thunker put in the video. And he compared it to Mexican gray wolves, which the zoo did have a couple over there, but it was not Mexican gray wolves. It was nothing that was even comparable, which I thought was pretty interesting. It was great to have that visual and an audio comparison. And, that's, and it's funny, there were some people here just a couple weeks ago sent me a video. Well, their phone, I think, was pointed at the ground. So that's all you see in the video. And you hear the people talking, but the same kind of howls. And the same thing, she said it came from, it was like, several hundred yards away. They'd actually seen the creatures there before, a lot of history. And this happened just a couple weeks ago, this howling. So I'm hoping to get on some more of that around here. But it's, and remember when we were there, they were talking at that time about the Gallup screamer. And then, of course, we drove 2 hours north to get some screams. There was nothing. We come back, and then 8 minutes there, There was one
We
right
actually
there.
caught. Yeah, we actually caught it. Caught it. It was pretty awesome. It was like perfect
That
timing.
cracked me up. That cracked me up. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
funny sometimes when you spend a lot of time doing something with all this, and then just out of the blue, something will happen like that.
Mhm. What do you think about the? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, there. You had a question.
Oh no, I said this is the first time I heard about a Gallup screamer. Usually Gallup's a pretty rowdy place, so there's always
Right, right.
someone or something screaming.
Yeah.
Well, that's where
Yeah.
you had some information about it, Don. When we got there, there were some people saying they were calling something the Gallup Screamer, but that was like I think 30 miles away. So we thought, well, and then on the reputation of Gallup, we thought, well, maybe we better not go over there.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There's the Gallup Lake area is another hot
Mm.
Yeah.
spot. They're trying to abduct pinon pickers, so they
Oh,
had to stop
oh no,
picking pinions in them areas. Yeah,
really?
yeah. And
Yeah.
certain, and then
Wow.
when you go towards Blue Gap, towards where what's his name, Benjamin Smith's encounters there, that area. They don't really pick pinions there too because the same deal.
Oh,
They get stalked and they
Mm.
get taken sometimes.
I
So
have to wonder. Do you guys are you guys familiar with? There was a story in one of Green's books, and it was called. It was actually the story comes from Sports Afield magazine back, I believe it was 1963, and it was titled "Long Hunter." I think it was American style or Alaskan, a Long Hunter Alaskan style. I think it was,
mm,
but it was about these two white trappers who were up in around the Den of Indians in their kind of it was kind of their territory. Not really. I don't know if it's the area is their land or if it's just adjacent. How that works out, but in Alaska, I'm not sure about all that. But anyway, these guys were trapping and they were talking about the story was about them, being kind of the last of their kind and all that. But
mm,
one day, this group of Dena Indians approached them, and they knew the chief, who had a pretty good reputation. He was a pretty tough guy, and but they knew who these two guys were, and they apparently respected each other's trap lines and stuff like that. So, you know, they didn't they weren't friendly, but they didn't bother each other's stuff. You know,
mhm,
so the Indians came there and they said, well, you know, we wanted to know. Well, they were telling them about the creature they called Gilyak. That was their name for it, and it was the big man who wears a little hat. And they
mhm,
said they were hunting caribou, but Gilyak didn't hunt caribou. He didn't eat caribou. He ate men. And they
Mm.
said, well, we'll take you. We'll show you his mark, and we want to know if you guys will camp with us because they don't bother the white men. And they were
mhm.
hoping that with the white guys in their camp that maybe they wouldn't eat the Indians. So have you guys ever heard anything like that with the Navajo that, that maybe they are more likely to go after native folks rather than non-native folks?
Just I think everyone's fair game, but
I
especially the women and
right?
children,
Yeah,
especially women and
Right.
children.
yeah.
They're the high targets. Real quick, let's finish the comments here real quick. This is Corvid, New Mexico. Hey brothers, the elegant hobo. I think Will sent a few pictures of the structures, one in Ontario and one in Alberta.
You may have, Chris. You might have to send them to me again because I don't remember.
And we got a question here for you, Will. Corvid, New Mexico. What do you think of the upside down trees? There used to be one on the land next to me.
I don't know. I mean, I know there are people that say they're Bigfoot done. Others say there's some other things. I honestly don't know.
Hmm. Wow. And here's another one here. What's up from Colorado? Che, uncle, cousins, brothers. Now, pinion picking, acorn, and cattail. Hunting season is around the corner. Be careful out there. Bigfoots are also collecting food, as mentioned above.
Yeah, be very
Mm,
careful, folks.
yeah, that's when we
Ne-
get a lot of encounters in the
Never go alone.
Southwest.
Never
Oh
go
yeah,
alone. Never.
if you do, make sure you talk to yourself out loud, like someone's there.
Yes, that
Yeah.
see that throws them off. They're actually, whether they can count numbers or not, but they can and people are like this too. If you really think about it, we identify individual people really well. Something that throws these guys off is if you really want to throw them off, if you're worried, everybody goes in a group dressed identically. That messes them up.
Hmm.
Oh
Also,
man.
because they can't really count heads. If there are more people out there than them, then they're really wary about it. If they know there are more of them than people, then they get really aggressive. Then the same thing true with talking out loud. And they've had this happen. People have done it. It's worked. They got one guy in southern Washington got surrounded by 5 of them. He got separated from his hunting buddies. And I told him just a few days before this, I said, if you get in a bad situation, talk out loud like there are other people nearby. And sure enough, they backed away. They let him, he was allowed to get to his truck.
Wow.
But for whatever reason, it throws him off.
That's good.
Oh,
I think I would do that as well.
Yeah, no, it's important.
Yeah. The elegant. Oh, okay, right here. Oh, well, this is the conversation between Elegant Hobo and Crazy Coyote. Here's Elegant. I have heard this year has been exceptionally intense for berry pickers in Alaska. Definitely be careful out there. I am already gearing up for archery bear coming up. Oh yeah, especially in Oregon, the mushroom pickers.
Oh yeah,
a lot of people go missing there too. So be careful, mushroom pickers in Oregon.
yes,
Be careful.
especially Lane County.
Lane County. Oh, okay.
It's down by the Three Sisters, and that area. I know the year we were down there a couple of years ago, and that 1 year alone, 156 people vanished in that area.
Oh man!
wow.
There were 11 people disappeared the month of August after we left. 11 people that month alone.
Wow.
Hmm.
You say that's my mushrooms, huh? That's my mushrooms.
Yeah, they were picking something. It wasn't mushrooms.
Picking someone else's territory. Hey, Crazy Coyote 1313, Arizona Bigfoot's hotspots. Howley. That's where I heard my first howl. Howley Lake. Howley Lake, White River. Yep, that's a really hot spot. Going up to Sibique, Christopher Creek, Navajo Reservation, south of St. Michael's, Flagstaff area, Walnut Canyon.
Oh,
St.
I believe
Michael's,
that.
that's where we were. We found the 2 structures. That's the Fort Defiant, St. Michael's plateau area.
I'd like to look around that area.
Oh yeah, I want to check the nests. I really would like to check it again.
Mhm.
But I don't know if the fire destroyed everything.
Yeah, it's hard telling.
Wildfire
Huh?
right there. Yeah, here's Mr. Curly. The screamer was from Shalimar.
Damn it. Damn it.
Coyote 1313, Crazy Coyote. JC Johnson's video about 2013 sheep kill, Navajo Nation, and Sasquatch Chronicles. Mark Bring episode both have reports of Bigfoot drinking blood. Oh yeah. We like in the documentary, we had this one lady out there by Canyon del Muerto where they said the Bigfoot was drinking like how many sheeps did she say? Was it 30? Something like that, 30, or it was drinking all the sheep's blood, and she called some family. They came over with the rifles, dropped it, and the Navajo Rangers came. And it was a huge.
Oh, that's
cover-up.
right. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
the brother was kneeling down in the grass watching him as they went by, and
Yep.
Huh.
Yeah.
So why do you think
That's
it was
crazy.
drinking blood? What
you know,
besides?
we don't really
Yeah.
know yet. I mean, and that's not the only time I've heard that. You know, the guy I told you about on the kill teams, he told me about one that they killed and they cut it open, and he described the stomach contents, which were pretty grisly. But along with, you know, different parts of the man that were in there, they said virtually every drop of the man's blood was in there. And he said they have a way of doing this because he said usually where they find where something's been killed, they don't find very much blood. So they have a way of draining whatever it is they're draining of blood in such an efficient manner that it doesn't leave a lot of traces. And that's all he said to me yet about that. I mean, I won't go into the description of the what it ate, but because it's too grisly. But I always find that interesting. But it's not unusual because there are other animals, you know, that will also drink blood. In fact, if you go back to the Minnesota Iceman story, you know, from Minnesota, where this Air Force captain shot the deer, he went to follow the deer, ran into the 3 creatures, and what they were doing was they were drinking the deer's blood. And then 2 ran away, and then the other one charged him, and he shot and killed it. But it's not unusual.
Yeah. Well, we've been getting reports from Page, Arizona to Gap, Arizona of same thing. This guy drinking the bloods, drinking all the blood.
I suppose there are a lot of nutrients in it, so you know, nature's not going to let things go to waste.
Oh yeah,
All right.
definitely. Definitely. Here's the elegant hobo again. Clint Mack was a famous hunting guide out of Bella Coola, BC. He had lots of stories about their hairy man.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Corvid, New Mexico. I have my new idea about him possibly being able to sense Neanderthal DNA in human beings. Maybe that is why some people have more interactions with them than others. What do you think about that?
I don't know. I mean, there's some people think that there's some correlation why some people have more encounters or not. Maybe it's just that those people that have more encounters are out in those places more often than people. I think there's a lot of people that would have sightings, but they simply don't pay any attention to them around their surroundings. And a good example is when, I mentioned about going on my 5 mile walks. I was filming that area up on the Carbon River, and my brother-in-law and my buddy John, I've known since we were kids, they were up a trail about 100 feet or so in front of me, and paying zero attention to anything around them. And I think that's a very common thing. People just don't watch their surroundings. And one could be standing right there. And how would you know if you're not paying attention? Like, for example, my brother-in-law, he rides 30 miles on his e-bike out on that area. There's been lots of activity in that area over the years. In fact, even recently. But he's got his music on with his headphones and he's riding fast. One could be standing, a whole family could be standing right there, right inside the brush, and you wouldn't see it. You'd just be, you know, heck, I walk out there and I have people go whizzing around me in their bikes and almost hit me because they're not paying attention. And here I am, in the middle of the trail.
Oh man, yeah.
So I think some of it's perception. People just aren't paying attention to their surroundings.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like whenever I go hiking with my brother-in-laws, I like to dress camo. I
Yeah.
like to get like at least 50 yards ahead and put my mask on, stand still, and they'll walk past me. They'll be calling for me. Dad, where you at? I'm right
you know,
here.
Forrest and I were talking about the billy ape, how they've, they're getting to know more about that. That's the one they call the lion killers, and they're big. They're a type of chimp, but they're almost man size, and a lot of times they're seen walking on two legs and doing things that other chimps don't do. But apparently, the locals there sometimes will walk right by them because they'll stand perfectly still for 20 minutes or so, and people will walk right by them without ever seeing them. And a Sasquatch could do the very same thing. And I think they do very often. People walk right by and have no inclination there was something there.
Oh wow.
Because
Um,
unless they get excited and exude excrete that stink that I think they use to mark things like gorillas, they have scent glands. And I've never, been close to them, never smelled it. I did walk through a wall of stink where we had a fresh sighting one time. And I think we probably caught the thing off guard. Because we walked into this wall of stuff that almost made us vomit. And then we walked through it real quick, and then we came back moments later and it was gone. So that's why what tells
Huh.
me there was a creature there. If it was something just natural, something dead or whatever, the smell would have persisted. But I got a call, and it wasn't too far from a fish hatchery, so I think that's why it was there near the Columbia River. But we drove out there and it was raining. Usually when it rains, smells don't radiate out very much. Rain kind of dampens that stuff. So we walked down the road where the guy said he saw this thing just like a half hour before. We walked into this wall of stink that made us gag. I mean, it was the worst thing I've ever smelled. We walked out of it really quick just to get away from it. And I said, I got to test this. So I walked immediately right back and it was gone, completely gone. And then we did a little search, and inside the tree line, I found some moss that was smashed down where something very heavy was standing. So I think sometimes that's what they do. They get excited, which is what other primates do that have scent glands. They get excited, then that smell comes out. That's something John Green told me years ago. I talked to him about, things like eye shine and smell and stuff like that. And he says, I don't have, that's something that the newspapers kind of jumped on. They wanted those particulars. They said red eyes and smell and all this stuff. And he said, that's not the picture that's right at all. He said, in most cases, people don't have a report of smell. And the same thing with eye shine. He'd say, well, reporters always say red eyes. He says, I've got 1,500 reports here. There's only 7 that say red eyes. And I know from my own personal observations, I've seen eye shine a number of times, and it's always been amber.
Yep,
Hmm.
that was my
So,
first time.
what do you think about the eye shine business? Well, what do you think that is? You think it's some type of night vision type deal, or
Well, they see well in the dark, but here's the thing, Sasquatches aren't out running around all night long. They hunt when most sightings occur plus or minus an hour of sunset, and same thing with sunrise. So, and the
Oh,
magic hour seems to be like around 2 in the morning. That seems to be
hmm,
when you're going to hear something, that's when you're going to hear or see it. It's right around 2:30 in the morning. I don't know why that is, but that seems to be the case. Uh, Part of the night they seem to be quiet. There's not much going on. So what that tells me is that, and here's the big thing: what's going on during those two times, especially with game animals and deer in particular. Deer are moving to and from their bedding areas and feeding areas right around sunset and sunrise. Sunset, they're coming out. In fact, when we were in Oregon, I was telling the team there, I said, now you watch, the deer are going to be coming out. I said, their bedding areas are going to be slightly up on those ridges, and usually about 3/4 of the way up these ridges. And I said, their feeding areas are going to be down over here. And like clockwork, I couldn't have planned it any better. Here come 3 deer coming from the exact place I pointed to, and they were heading in the direction where I was pointing to their feeding areas. And I said, now what the Sasquatches are going to be doing, they're going to be setting up their game plan to hunt these animals when they're coming out of their bedding areas. They'll ambush them along the way somewhere. And then I'll be doggone if we didn't start hearing vocals, from different points outside of where the deer were moving. So we got out of there quickly, and I actually thought we were going to be out of the hunt zone, but there was more of the creatures coming from the other place. We were trying to skirt the area, and we heard a vocal just outside the truck. I mean, it kind of freaked us out right there. It was that close to us, but they were
wow.
moving in from another direction. So they were actually circling that group of deer.
wow. The other thing, what do you think about the dogman, the different other types of Sasquatch that people have been seeing?
Well, what I was told, and from my main inside source, I've known him for more than a decade, and had gotten to be pretty good friends. He told me that most of those are misidentifications because there's 22 varieties of these creatures on North America alone, and there are 3 of them actually have the elongated face that people mistake for like a wolf snout. And some of the other particulars are very much like that. In fact, I interviewed a guy from Oklahoma, and he swore up and down he saw a dog man. He had somebody an artist do a rendition. Well, everything looked like a Bigfoot except for that extended face. I mean, the feet,
Yeah,
hands, everything were identical.
Mm-hmm.
So my source told me most of the time. Now he did say that there is a kind of wolf that's very large that's there aren't many of, mostly on the East Coast. That's apparently not recognized, but is out there. But it's a real wolf. It's not something that walks around on 2 legs. So
mm,
the other ones, he said, most often are these creatures that are misidentifications, and people do that. They'll relate something to whatever's in their mind. That's the closest thing they know to whatever it is they're looking at. So that's the reference they use.
well,
Hmm.
well, that is
What about
true. Like
what
there
about you,
are
Darren?
species. There are well, there that is true. That come to think about it, there are species of monkeys that do have
Yeah,
the
exactly.
long.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, have you got any tales of a Bigfoot with a tail? You know,
I don't know.
anything like, huh? Yeah, just come to think about it, I was kind of just spitballing inside my head. Um, wow. So, do you have any tricks or anything that you would want to relay to people that are actually having Bigfoot nuisance? I guess. Do you have anything besides? Because that's the first time I ever heard about it was the lemon
Oh,
and the bleach.
yeah. Well, and I got that from my inside sources. So they said that, and this is the government, um, that there were measures that they had to, and they learned a lot of this from native folks in Eastern Canada. That's where they went when, He said when the government first got into this, and this goes back, I'll give a little backstory on that, because I asked him, I said, well, how did the government get involved in this? And I was in the Army in the 70s and 80s. So back in those days, whatever the Russians did, we paid very close attention to, no matter how crazy it sounded, because they were doing a lot of weird things. And apparently word came out somewhere that they were trying to weaponize their version of what we had in North America. So, of
Wow.
course, the military decided to look into that to see if there was anything real to the story. So in the process, gun cameras, and he said it was actually very easy for the pilots with their gun cameras to find these things. So they had a lot of photographs, they had a lot of information. So what they did is they went to the native folks up in Eastern Canada, because they were more open to talking about it than tribes here in the lower 48. And for good reason, of course. So they got a lot of information from them. In fact, he even told me a funny story about one of the elders who was talking to this group of military people, and one of the guys apparently was joking. And I can't remember how the interaction actually went, but needless to say, he pretty well embarrassed this captain about going out there and confronting one of these things that would rip your arm off. But so they got a lot of insight from those folks, and then they utilized that in the field work, trying to learn more about the things. So which still goes on. It's all secret. And I've met people, and being a veteran, other veterans will contact me and we'll talk, because vets, it's like kind of like native folks, you guys will talk to yourselves where you won't talk to outsiders, right? It's kind of the same thing in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So one guy contacted me. He was a mortuary affairs officer before he retired. Most of his career, he was enlisted. Then he got a commission, so he retired as a captain. And which isn't a real high rank, but you spend 20 years, most of it as an enlisted man, then get commissioned. To go up the ranks as a commissioned officer, it takes quite a bit of time to get promoted up to a higher rank. So he retired after 20 years as a captain. But he said around the year 2000, they were in Washington, D.C., and they were moving records. I went through basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky. That used to be the Armor Center, because I was an armored cavalryman. So that's where I trained. So in the years afterwards, they moved all of that stuff to Fort Benning, Georgia. Now it's mostly records keeping. They do at Knox. So he said they were moving all these records out of DC, moving them to Knox for permanent storage. And he said he came across this one set of files. And he said there was like 1,100 of these folders. And he asked the guy in charge if he minded looking at them. There was something funny about them. And he said, sure, they're going to be destroyed anyway, so you go ahead and take a look. So he was looking through these files, and these files went back several generations, where these creatures, apparently when military aircraft go down for whatever reason, it's like ringing the dinner bell for these things.
Oh man.
Oh,
There was one case where the plane went out of Yakima. It was one of these fixed wing planes they use for mail runs, and it crashed in an alpine lake 5 minutes after it took off. And I know where the lake is, because it's the only lake in the area in the flight path. They said that apparently several of these things, they sent 20 investigators up there to find the plane crash. And what they found was where these things had been waiting by the shore of the lake for these guys to get out. And then they ate them right there. They found where their bones had been scraped on the rocks and all kinds of stuff. But all these records indicated that. And so, when you start hearing things from numerous sources that all align with each other, you have to start believing that, hey, this stuff is really going on. And a lot of that stuff really changed my outlook. So some of the things, I took seriously the measures that he told me that to use. And I've advised people, like, if you've got them, here's an example. We had a guy up in Southern Oregon who these creatures were coming to their home, and he had 4 young children, I think under the age of 10. And they were sleeping in this one room, and this thing would come in there every night and stare at the kids. Well, the same thing that's happening at the reservation there. Predators go after the easy targets, the old, the young, and the sick, right? Because a fight in nature can be a death sentence if you get injured. from disease. Most predators know that they won't go after the strongest, what in whatever group they're going after. They'll go after, the females, the kids, the elderly, sick things, people like whatever's easy target. These guys are exactly the same way. That's why they do that. So what they found, because they're highly territorial, when they encroach on your property, now they're a little skittish about that, unless they're like serial killers. They kind of work their way up to the things they do.
Yeah.
The more success they get at doing something, the more bold they get. So you're kind of preventing that by, stopping them with the territorial stuff first. The mixture, the half and half mixture of bleach and
Clearing brush.
Yeah, you need to clear brush at least 50 feet away from your house all around, because these guys, they like to come in hidden. So they won't go out in the open if they don't have to. So that's a measure. Having motion sensor lights, that throws them off. You don't want to have the same routine all the time. So if you go out and do exactly the same things at the same time every day, they might be there for weeks watching for their opportunity. But if you change that up, it throws them off enough to where, they'll basically think the heck with it, they'll go somewhere else. It's very simple measures, but they are effective.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
We got less than 13 minutes left here, gentlemen. Let me read this real quick, and then we'll shoot you off, Darren. Okay, with your question. Let's finish this real quick. Let's see here. This is Digger Dog. Always talk when out in the woods by myself. Still, the kids pull jokes on me. Digger Dog, have to go help a vet friend / take care and be safe out there. You as well, Digger Dog.
Yep.
You as well. Thank you. And Mr. Curly, blood is the energy drink. Oh yeah. Yep. Crazy Coyote 13. If it was probably needed iron and salt. Bob Gimlin's video about the two kids befriending a young Bigfoot. Adults killed it. They autopsy it. Bigfoot had two canines in the back mouth. Body disappeared. Oh, see here. It's Crazy Coyote 1313. Tactical awareness. People shut the phones off. Okay, let me start over again. Tactical awareness. People shut the phones off. Shut down the tunnel vision twice. I almost stepped on a rattlesnake. Oh, heads up, baby rattlesnake are hatching now. Be careful. Oh,
yep,
yeah.
good advice. Good advice.
Yep.
Oh yeah, always. Corbett, New Mexico. Have you ever been out around here in Rama or on the Navajo Nation? Out here, many events, Mormons, Pueblo military, and many others. It's just not one particular group of people. Oh yeah, everywhere, all over the place. Crazy Coyote 1313. Oh, my older bro's ex-girlfriend had a possible skinwalker encounter back in '98. First thing my dad asked was did it smell? Because he seen a Bigfoot in the 1940s Salt River area. He said no, it was a skinwalker. Yeah, they do give off different smells, that's for sure. Sparky's Paranormal and Outdoors. Okay, he's replying to someone else. Okay, let's see here. Crazy Coyote 1313. I remember that Monster Quest episode, Russian Ape Army. Whoa, I gotta check that out now. Sparky's Paranormal and Outdoors. Snow Lake, Tapis Lake, Cholak Lake, Lake Ingalls, and Dewey Lake. Yeah, I'm born and raised in Washington. Oh, cool. Shout out. Mary Ruth Mitchell. I am old, sick female. I am doomed. No. You're just enticing. You're just enticing. Crazy Coyote 1313 sounds like a high autistic behavior they have. Oh yeah. There's like stories where their face is kind of off. The Elegant Hobo. Good show. Talk soon. D's and W.
Thanks, Chris.
Yep. Thanks, Chris. We'll see you again on the next one. Yeah, is there go ahead, Darren. We have we have 10 minutes left. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what's your ideas on these military bases? people tend to see these Bigfoot on military bases, along with a bunch of other cryptic um, beings. What do you think about that subject?
Well, I grew up near Fort Lewis, and I was stationed there a couple of times, so I can tell you about that one in particular because it's home. Um, a lot of the training area in Fort Lewis is, I believe, it's the third largest U.S. base continentally as far as land goes, and most of that's training area, but a lot of the training area is not really used. So, and I can tell you a situation. I had a 15-man squad when I was with the 5th Air Cav back in from 79 to 81. We had flown out to, I had a 15-man squad. They flew us out to the Rainier training area out on the Nisqually River. And I got a call from my boss saying that there was nobody out there. We were going to do some kind of training. I don't remember what training we were going to do. We were always doing something, but he radioed me and he said, look, nobody's out there. There's nobody out there from within miles of you guys. So if you want to train, go ahead and train. We're not going to come and pick you up till morning. If not, just, hunker down, do whatever. So I said, okay, see you guys in the morning. And I told my team leaders, I said, set them in an ambush formation. We're going to practice ambushes. So the 2 fire teams took off. They set up their portion of the formation. I think we were doing an L-shaped ambush, and I took my radio man, this poor PFC, I'm dragging him along. Radio man's only supposed to be arm's length away from the squad leader at all times so I can grab the radio and not only coordinate the teams, but call for fire or airstrikes or whatever we're doing. Stay in communication with higher-ups. So I'm dragging this poor kid, and it's dark behind me, and I had one of the first, when they first came out with night vision goggles, after the first development they had after the old Starlight scopes. And the first ANP VS5s weren't real good. They were okay. They were way better than the old Starlight scopes. But you still, if you're in a super dark area, you could see shapes and things like that. So I had them on. They gave me a pair to try them out. So I'm in there leading this kid into the spot because I had to be in between the fire teams for command and control purposes. So I'm looking for a spot to set up. And what I see was this large, dark shape in front of me. And I swear it was like a sheet of plywood in height and width. And it made a move like 2 feet from my right to my left. And instantly, like the hair on the back of my neck went up. My skin got cold. I knew what was right there. I mean, like 6-7 feet in front of me, and I'm backing into this kid's name was Douglas. I'm like, Douglas, get out, back up. And of course it's dark, he can't see, and I'm pushing him, to get out of the tree line. And I didn't say anything to the guys. I hollered for him. I said, rally on me. And I said, okay, we're going to stand down. I decided I'm not going to do any training tonight. Just go ahead and, there was this old tank trail grown over with grass, and it was kind of a 3-way intersection. So there was a lot of space around us. And what we do is you'd pick a partner and you'd sit back to back, and you could sleep like that because we didn't bring our sleeping bags or anything. And it was warm, summertime. So pretty soon, one of the guys says, hey, Sarge, I thought we were out here all by ourselves. I said, yeah, there's nobody out here for miles. And he says, well, I hear somebody walking around us. And then a couple of the other guys piped up and said the same thing. And then one of the other guys says, hey, Sarge, you're from here. What do you know about Bigfoot? So I told them what I had seen when I was a teenager. And I bet you to this day, they'd all swear up and down that that's what was circling us.
No, definitely.
But I knew a guy recently that was stationed out there. He's a cop in Wisconsin now, but he just got out of the Army, and he had an encounter out in that same area. So, but it's an area it's on the river, and just out beyond that was where the Clark Ranch was. So that whole area is a huge wilderness area, and they can come and go up and down that river from Mount Rainier all they want to, and nobody's ever going to see them.
Yeah. Wow. That's pretty cool. Let me finish Sparky's Paranormal Outdoors right here before we wrap up the show. You would say Fort Lewis and Yakima Training Center, huge areas that have no one in the area most of the time, is why they go there. And then he comes back again. Straight scopes rock. Yes, I'm old in the Army. LOL.
Same here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of game out there. There's a lot of deer. So any place that there's not a whole lot of people, they're going to go there for the game. I mean,
Yeah.
They follow the food. Here's something too on the
Mhm.
blood thing that I was thinking. Somebody mentioned about minerals. Up in Northern California, I had a witness that had me go to his former property, and he didn't think anything was. I didn't think anything was still there. But we found this little intermittent stream next to where his house used to be, and there was an old marking, one of the broken trees near the house, where he saw the creature like 4 years before. And this little intermittent stream had a tiny bit of water, but there was a lot of clay there. And I found a 4-foot section of these big finger drag marks in the clay, about an inch deep. And you look at other wild creatures, they will eat clay to supplement, the mineral needs in their bodies. Lots of animals do that. That's why they have, mineral and salt licks for cows and
Yeah.
stuff. But primates, a lot of them will eat clay and stuff like that if they don't get the minerals they need.
Oh
So
wow.
that blood could be what they're doing.
Well,
Hmm.
that is
That's pretty cool.
that is
Right
interesting too.
here.
I know the Navajos make a dish too with
Hey
clay
Darren,
also.
Oh
we got
yeah,
we
yeah,
got we got 4 minutes. Oh yeah, and we got Navajo blood sausage as well.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
that's
We
good
like we
stuff
like
too.
let me finish reading this off right here. He's talking about the old M80 tank trails. Oh wow.
M60.
M60.
I
Oh,
actually got to crew an
M60.
M60 A1 in
Oh
Germany
wow.
for a while.
Oh, that's what's up. And Tyson Lolito, good
Hey
show
Tyson.
once again.
Yep.
Also for bug protection. but
Yeah.
Will, can you tell everyone where to find you and your podcast?
You can either look up my name on YouTube or Creek Devil. That's the name of the show. It's on Spotify and Podbean and all the other platforms. There's a whole bunch of different platforms. I can't even remember them all now through Podbean, but they put them out through those different outlets. So
Yeah.
if you want to hear witness accounts, I encourage people to go listen there.
No, definitely. We're
And
definitely gonna get you back on because that other Adam, I'm not sure what streaming service he's gonna put that Sasquatch Navajo documentary. And
Well, the Sasquatch Navajo, that's the TV show. That's a 10-part TV series.
Mhm.
And I've seen the first 2 episodes. He did a really good job. But I don't know
Oh
how
yeah.
that's going to be. I don't know how that's going to go out there yet. Also, the second documentary is nearing completion too, and that's Bigfoot Southwest. That one's called.
Mhm.
you also
Oh,
got a couple
awesome.
of books too that you read, right?
Oh,
I,
I have 9 books I published. If you go on my website WiiliamJevning.com, there's links in there to the books.
Yep, I got all
nice.
of them. I got
I'm
all of them underneath
I'm
my
wor-
TV.
I'm working on number 10 right now.
Oh, nice,
Oh,
nice,
wow.
nice. Yep.
Very good.
I'm gonna be shutting the show down, guys. Any last thoughts you guys want to say later or anything like that? To anybody? Say
Oh,
it.
well, I would say keep your eyes open. Like we were saying, uh, you can walk out in the woods and you think you own everything out there, but I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
there are things that watch you. So
yeah.
I would say
All
if
right.
anybody wants to reach out to me, you can contact me at wjevning@gmail.com. And that's for questions. If you've had an encounter or
Yeah.
whatever you want to know, just reach out and get a hold of me. And I try to answer everybody's emails. So
All right. I'm gonna be shutting us down right here, guys. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Will. Thank you,
yep.
Darren. We're
Well,
running
you
short.
bet, guys.
Oh, yep.
yep.
Thank you for tuning in to Don't Whistle at Night. We've been broadcasting live here on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans. You guys stay safe out there. Keep your eyes open and stay tuned. We'll be back next Sunday. All right.
Yep.